There is a moment, and perhaps you have felt it, when everything becomes too loud. Not the world outside, the world inside, the thoughts that spiral at 3 in the morning, the plans that collapse before they begin, the version of yourself you keep imagining but never seem to reach, the life you can almost touch but somehow always remains just beyond your fingertips. You have tried to force it, you have tried to push, you have strategized, hustled, visualized boards of your dream life, repeated affirmations in the mirror until the words lost all meaning. And yet, something is missing. Not effort, not ambition, not even desire. What is missing is the one thing the ancient Stoics discovered over 2,000 years ago, the one thing that separates those who endlessly chase their dreams from those who quietly, consistently, almost effortlessly call their greatest life into being. What is missing is a relaxed mind, not a passive mind, not a defeated mind, not a mind that has given up and surrendered to mediocrity, a relaxed mind, a mind that is so clear, so grounded, so rooted in its own unshakable center that it becomes magnetic, a mind that does not grasp but receives, a mind that does not beg the universe for scraps but moves through life with such aligned intention that the right things, the right people, the right opportunities cannot help but find their way to it. This is what the Stoics knew. This is what Marcus Aurelius practiced in the chaos of running the Roman Empire. This is what Epictetus discovered in the unimaginable suffering of slavery. This is what Seneca understood as he navigated the treacherous politics of Nero's court. He always one mistake away from exile or death. They were not dreaming from couches. They were not avoiding the difficulty of life. They were standing in the fire and remaining calm. They were facing loss, betrayal, illness, war, uncertainty, and choosing every single day to come back to the center. And from that center they built, they created, they led, they loved, they transformed. They left behind wisdom so powerful that you are listening to it right now, more than 2,000 years later, because somewhere deep inside of you, you recognize the truth in it. So if you are ready, if you are truly ready to stop fighting yourself, to stop exhausting yourself in the pursuit of a life that seems to keep running away from you, and to finally learn the ancient art of relaxing your mind so completely, so deeply, so authentically that everything you have ever wanted begins to flow toward you with a naturalness that will astonish you, then stay with me, because what you are about to learn will change everything. Welcome to Stoic Wisdom. This is the channel where we go beyond the surface of ancient philosophy and bring you the deep, transformative teachings of the Stoics, not as museum pieces, not as academic exercises, but as living, breathing tools for navigating the real challenges of your real life. If this is your first time here, welcome home. We are so glad you found us. And if you have been with us for a while, you already know that what we do here is different. We go deep, we go honest, we go far enough beneath the surface that something inside of you actually shifts. Before we begin, I want to ask you something personally. If what we create here has ever helped you, if even one video has given you a moment of clarity, a breath of peace, a shift in perspective that made your day a little more livable, please take a moment right now to like this video. It takes 1 second, but it tells us that this work matters, and it helps us reach thousands of other people who are searching for exactly what you found here. And please subscribe to Stoic Wisdom if you have not already done so. Hit that notification bell so you never miss what we put out. Every single piece of content we create is made with deep care and genuine intention to serve your growth. Leave us a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what you are struggling with right now. Tell us what part of your life feels like it needs the most peace, the most clarity, the most transformation. We read every comment. Your voice matters here. Share this video with someone you love, someone who is exhausted, someone who is overthinking, someone who is working so hard but feeling like nothing is moving. This might be exactly what they need today. And if you feel moved, if this channel has genuinely added value to your life, you can support us through Super Thanks right here on YouTube. Every single contribution goes directly into creating more of this content, more depth, more wisdom, more transformation for this extraordinary community we are building together. Now, let us begin. Part 1. The Foundation. What the Stoics actually understood about the mind. To understand what the Stoics knew about relaxing the mind, we first have to understand what the Stoics actually believed the mind to be. And this is where most people get the Stoics completely wrong. There is a popular misconception that Stoicism is about emotional suppression, that the ideal Stoic is someone who does not feel, someone who buries their emotions under a wall of rational logic, who moves through life like a human robot, unaffected, untouched, disconnected from the richness of human experience. This could not be further from the truth. The Stoics were not trying to eliminate feeling. They were trying to transform it. They made a distinction so important that every single thing we will discuss today rests upon it, between two fundamentally different kinds of internal experience. The first kind they called pathos. We translate this word today as passion or emotion, but in the Stoic tradition, pathos referred specifically to those emotional reactions that arise when we are not in alignment with reality. Reactions driven by false beliefs, by confusion about what is truly valuable and what is not, by the mistaken conviction that our well-being depends on things outside of our control. Pathos is the panic that grips you when a plan falls apart. Pathos is the despair that swallows you when a relationship ends. Pathos is the rage that consumes you when someone treats you unfairly. Not because those events do not matter, they do, but because pathos is a response driven by a fundamental misunderstanding of what you actually are and what you actually need. The second kind of internal experience the Stoics called eupatheiai. These were what they considered the good emotions, the emotions that arise naturally in a person who is aligned with reason, with virtue, with the true nature of reality. Joy, not as a grasping excitement, but as a deep and stable gladness. Caution, not as paralyzing fear, but as wise and grounded discernment. Wishing, not as desperate longing, but as clear and confident intention directed toward genuine good. The Stoic project was not to empty the human being of feeling. It was to transform the quality of feeling, to move from reactive, contracted, fear-driven states to expansive, grounded, reason-guided ones. And the central practice that makes this transformation possible is precisely what we are here to explore today. The practice of relaxing the mind into its natural state of clarity and power. Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, a journal he never intended for anyone to read, a private record of his daily practice of returning to himself. He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Notice what he says, power over your mind, not control over circumstances, not the ability to force outcomes, not dominion over other people or the unpredictable weather of external events. Power over your mind. This is the beginning of everything, because the Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to confirm in the language of research and data. The quality of your inner state determines the quality of your outer experience in ways that go far beyond mere perception. A tense mind misses opportunities that a relaxed mind catches easily. A tense mind makes decisions from fear that later appear obviously wrong. A tense mind communicates desperation to everyone around it, and desperation repels the very things we most want. A tense mind is literally not capable of accessing the full spectrum of its own intelligence, creativity, and intuitive wisdom, because tension, anxiety, and stress all activate the brain's survival circuits, narrowing cognitive bandwidth to tunnel vision focus on threat. A relaxed mind, a truly, deeply, stoically relaxed mind, operates from an entirely different neurological state. It is open, it is receiving, it notices more, feels more clearly, decides with greater wisdom, communicates with greater warmth and authority, and exists in a state of natural, creative receptivity that is, quite literally, the fertile ground in which the life you want grows. The Stoics called this state of mental clarity and groundedness hegemonikon, the governing faculty, the rational soul at its highest and most natural function. When the hegemonikon is operating correctly, when it is not distorted by false beliefs, not flooded by unconsidered emotional reactions, not contracted by anxiety about things outside our control. It is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It is the force that built Rome. It is the force that allowed Epictetus, a man who owned literally nothing and whose body was not even his own legal property, to become one of the most influential teachers in human history. It is the force that enabled Seneca to face death with such grace and equanimity that his executioners reportedly stood in silent awe. And it is the force available to you, right now, today, in the circumstances of your actual life, if you are willing to learn how to access it. Let us go deeper. Part 2. The Dichotomy of Control, the greatest relaxation practice ever invented. If there is one teaching in all of Stoic philosophy that functions as the master key to mental relaxation, it is the Dichotomy of Control. Epictetus opens his entire teaching with it, the very first line of the Enchiridion. His handbook of Stoic practice reads, "Some things are in our control and others not." 5 words. 5 words that, if you genuinely absorb them, not just understand them intellectually, but actually feel their truth in the body, will do more to relax your mind than 10 years of traditional therapy or 10,000 hours of meditation. Some things are in our control, as and others not. Epictetus then makes a list. What is in our control? Opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever are our own actions. What is not in our control? Body, reputation, command, and, in one word, whatever are not our own actions. Read that list again. Slowly. In our control, how we think, what we value, what we pursue, what we choose to want, what we choose to avoid, how we respond, what we decide, how we act. Not in our control, what happens to our body, what other people think of us, what other people decide, what external events unfold. Now here is where most people misread this teaching and miss its deepest gift. They read the second list and feel a contraction. They feel a kind of sadness or resistance. They think, but I want things to work out. I want people to love me. I want my health to be good. I want my business to succeed. If those things are out of my control, then I am helpless. Then life is just random and nothing I do matters. But this is exactly backwards. The dichotomy of control is not a teaching about helplessness. It is a teaching about the most radical possible empowerment. Because here is what Epictetus actually understood. The reason most human beings are perpetually exhausted, perpetually anxious, perpetually contracted, is not because life is hard. It is because they are constantly trying to control things that are not controllable. They are spending enormous amounts of mental and emotional and physical energy trying to manage, manipulate, predict, and force outcomes that are fundamentally beyond their reach. And this effort is not only futile, it is the primary source of all suffering. You think about how much of your mental energy on any given day is consumed by things in that second list. What will they think of me? How will this situation turn out? What if my body breaks down? What if the economy collapses? What if the people I love stop loving me? What if everything I have built falls apart? And here is the cruelest irony. All that energy spent worrying about the uncontrollable does absolutely nothing to improve the outcomes you are worried about. It does not make the feared thing less likely to happen. It does not give you more control over it. All it does is drain you. Drain the mental resources, the emotional vitality, the creative energy that you could be pouring into the one place where your effort actually changes things. The domain of your own choices, values, responses, and actions. Epictetus says, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." Make the best use of what is in your power. When you genuinely practice this, when you actually, in real time, catch yourself spending mental energy on the uncontrollable and redirect that energy back to what you can influence, something extraordinary happens. The mind relaxes, not because you have given up, not because you have become passive or resigned, but because you have stopped fighting a battle that cannot be won and turned your full attention and intention to the battle that absolutely can be, the inner one. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled one of the most powerful empires in human history, who faced wars and plagues and betrayals and the deaths of children and the constant pressure of decisions that affected millions of lives, he practiced this teaching every single day. He writes, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." Never let the future disturb you, not because the future does not matter, but because the future is not here yet, and worrying about it in the present does not prepare you better for it. It actually impairs your ability to be fully present and fully effective right now, which is the only place where you can actually do anything. Here is the practical exercise I want you to try. Right now, if you are somewhere you can take a moment, think of the thing that is causing you the most mental tension today, the thing that is creating the most anxiety, the most rumination, the most feeling of being stuck or threatened or uncertain. Now ask yourself this question: is this thing in my control? Not partially, not theoretically, fundamentally. Is it in the domain of your own choices, values, responses, and actions? If yes, then instead of worrying about it, decide what specific action you will take. What is the next concrete step within your control? Make that decision, then do it. If no, if it is genuinely in the realm of the uncontrollable, then practice what Epictetus called the art of gentle release. Not violent suppression, not denial, not telling yourself you do not care, but a genuine, intentional, compassionate letting go of the illusion that your anxiety about it is helping, because it is not. Your anxiety about the uncontrollable is not a form of caring. It is not useful preparation. It is not responsible planning. It is simply suffering, self-generated, self-sustained, self-defeating suffering that you have the power to stop. And when you stop, when you truly let go of the uncontrollable and bring all your energy home to the one domain where you are genuinely sovereign, your mind relaxes into a state of focused, creative, purposeful calm that is, without exaggeration, the most powerful state a human being can occupy. This is the beginning of manifestation, not the desperate, anxious, white-knuckling variety, the effortless kind, the kind that flows from alignment, the kind that the Stoics knew. Part 3. Amor Fati, the secret art of loving what is. There is a phrase in Stoic philosophy, a Latin phrase that Nietzsche later made famous, though its roots go deep into the Stoic tradition. That may be the most counterintuitive and yet most liberating idea you will ever encounter. Amor Fati, love of fate, not acceptance of fate, not resignation to fate, not grudging tolerance of fate, love of fate, to love everything that happens to you, to embrace not just the beautiful and the fortunate, but the painful, the inconvenient, the catastrophic, the utterly devastating, to greet every event in your life, every single one, with the radical declaration, I wanted this, I choose this. This is exactly what needed to happen. When you first encounter this idea, your mind probably reacts with resistance. Love my failures, love my losses, love the moments when everything I worked for fell apart, love the relationships that broke me, love the plans that collapsed, the betrayals that blindsided me, the illnesses that brought me to my knees. Yes, not because suffering is good, not because difficulty should be sought, but because the alternative of resisting, fighting, resenting, and raging against the unchangeable, is the one guaranteed path to a life of perpetual inner conflict. Marcus Aurelius puts it this way: love only what happens to you, what is woven in the pattern of your destiny. For what could suit you more? What could suit you more? This is not poetic exaggeration. This is a profound observation about the nature of reality and the nature of human potential. Consider the times in your life when things fell apart, the moments you were most broken, the experiences you most desperately wanted to undo. Now consider who you are today, the wisdom you carry, the compassion you have developed, the strength you discovered, the clarity you gained about what actually matters and what does not. How much of that, how much of the best of who you are right now was forged in exactly those moments you would have chosen to skip. The Stoics understood that resistance to reality is itself the primary source of suffering, not the events themselves, but our insistence that they should not have happened, that they are wrong, that the universe has made a mistake. Epictetus asks us, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." A tranquil flow of life, not because nothing goes wrong, but because you have released the exhausting insistence that your preferences should govern the universe. Now here is where this becomes practically relevant to manifestation. When you practice Amor Fati, when you genuinely, at a felt level, learn to embrace what is, something remarkable happens. The enormous amount of energy that was previously consumed by resistance becomes available for creation. Think of it this way: every moment you spend resenting the present is a moment of creative energy spent going backwards, fighting what already exists, arguing with accomplished facts. This is not only futile, it is energetically catastrophic. You are burning your most precious resource, your life force, your attention, your vitality, on something that will never change. The moment you release that resistance, not pretend the difficult thing is not difficult, but genuinely stop fighting what already is, that energy becomes free. It flows forward. It becomes available for the actual work of creating what you want. This is why the most effective creators, builders, and innovators are almost universally people with an extraordinary capacity to absorb setbacks and keep moving, not because they do not feel the difficulty, but because they do not stay in the stage of resistance. They feel it, acknowledge it, learn from it, and release it quickly, gracefully, and with genuine equanimity. Marcus Aurelius practiced this even in the most extreme circumstances. He lost several children. He faced a devastating plague that killed millions. He dealt with military campaigns that seemed endless and wars that dragged for years. He was surrounded by betrayal and ingratitude, and yet his meditations are not a record of a bitter man. They are a record of a man who, every single day, found his way back to acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but the active, loving, choosing acceptance of a person who understood that to be alive is to be in the midst of conditions you did not entirely choose. Never let the soul stoop to complaining, he writes, because complaining is a declaration that reality has made a mistake. And the Stoics knew that reality never makes mistakes. It simply is. Practice this today. Identify one thing in your life right now that you are fighting. One circumstance, one outcome, one unchangeable fact about your past or present that you keep wishing were different. And practice saying, not just thinking, but truly feeling, I choose this. This is part of my path. This is exactly what was needed to bring me where I am going. Notice what happens in your body when you do. Notice the subtle softening, the release, the space that opens up. That space is where your greatest life begins to grow. Part 4, the Inner Citadel, Building the Unshakable Mind. Marcus Aurelius had a phrase he returned to again and again in his private journals. The inner citadel. He conceived of the mind, the rational, reasoning, choosing, responding aspect of the human person, as a fortress. Not a fortress that kept the world out, but a fortress that remained standing regardless of what the world brought against it. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul, he writes. Above all, grant yourself this retreat constantly and renew yourself. Grant yourself this retreat constantly and renew yourself. Most of us are looking for peace somewhere out there, in the right circumstances, in the relationship that finally works. Now, in the bank account that finally reaches the right number, in the achievement that finally justifies our existence, in the moment when all the variables align and everything is finally okay. The Stoics had a word for this endless postponement of peace: foolishness, not because those outer things do not matter, but because peace that depends on outer circumstances is not peace. It is a hostage situation, your well-being held captive by things entirely outside your control, handed over to the unpredictable tides of events and other people's choices and the random weather of fortune. The inner citadel is the understanding, the visceral, practiced, daily renewed understanding, that the only unshakable foundation for a peaceful mind is an inner one. But what does this actually mean in practice? How do you build a citadel inside yourself? The Stoics gave us a complete and sophisticated answer to this question, and it involves several specific practices that we will explore in depth throughout this video. But let us start with the foundational insight. The inner citadel is built not by adding things to yourself, but by removing false beliefs about what you need in order to be okay. This is what philosophers call apatheia, and again, this is wildly misunderstood as emotional numbness or indifference. Apatheia does not mean not caring. It means freedom from pathos, from those contracted, reactive, reality-distorting emotional states that arise from false beliefs about what is necessary for your well-being. When you genuinely understand, not just intellectually, but at the level of lived experience, that your deepest well-being does not depend on the outcome of the presentation, the approval of the critic, the success of the venture, the response of the person you love, you enter a state of extraordinary freedom, not because you stop wanting those things, not because you no longer care about outcomes, but because you are no longer enslaved to them. You can pursue them fully, enthusiastically, with complete engagement, and yet hold the outcome lightly, because you know at the deepest level that your value, your worth, your capacity for genuine happiness does not rest there. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not the kind of false detachment that uses philosophy as an excuse to not care about anything. So this is the deep courage of engaging fully with life, while remaining rooted in an identity that cannot be taken from you by any external force. Epictetus says, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Master of himself, not master of his circumstances, not master of his outcomes, master of himself. And the breathtaking paradox is this: the moment you become truly master of yourself, the moment the quality of your inner state genuinely stops depending on the behavior of the external world, is the moment when your relationship with the external world transforms most profoundly, because you are no longer grasping at it. You are no longer frightened of it. You are no longer communicating desperation, need, or insufficiency to every person and situation you encounter. You are showing up whole, and wholeness, genuine, grounded. A Stoic wholeness is the single most magnetic quality a human being can possess. People are drawn to it. Opportunities find it. Synchronicities that would otherwise seem impossible begin to occur with surprising frequency. Not because the universe has suddenly started playing favorites, but because your cleared, open, uncontracted presence is finally available to receive what was always there. Let us talk about how to build this citadel in practical, daily terms. The first practice is what Epictetus called the Discipline of Assent, and it is the foundational skill of Stoic mental training. Every experience you have begins as an impression, a presentation of reality to your mind. Something happens. Your body responds. Your brain fires. An image, a feeling, a thought arises. This is the impression. Here is what most people do not know. There is a moment, often extremely brief, but always present, between the impression and your assent to it, between what happens and what you make it mean, between the stimulus and your response. This moment is the most important moment in your entire mental life, because in this moment you have a choice. You can assent to the impression. Let it sweep you into its emotional valence. Accept its implicit story about what this means and what you need to do. Or you can pause. You can examine the impression. You can ask, is this impression accurate? Is what I am feeling based on a true understanding of what has actually happened? Is the meaning I am giving this event the one it actually deserves? This pause, this moment of examination before assent, is the practice of building the inner citadel. The moment by moment, impression by impression, you are training the rational faculty to remain sovereign, to not be hijacked by automatic reactions, to maintain its own authority even in the face of powerful emotional pulls. Marcus Aurelius describes this in a way that has never left me. He says that the practiced Stoic learns to greet even the most alarming impressions with a kind of loving patience. He examines them, he interrogates them, he asks, what are you really? Are you as threatening as you present yourself? Are you as permanent as you feel? Is there a truer, more liberating way to understand what is happening here? And almost always, the answer is yes. The threatening thing is rarely as permanent as it feels in the moment of encounter. The loss is rarely as total as it seems. The failure is rarely as definitive. The crisis is rarely as unnavigable. The rejection is rarely as meaningful about your fundamental worth as your wounded feelings suggest. When you see this, when you practice seeing it again and again until it becomes the habitual quality of your perception, the mind begins to exist in a state of natural, alert, joyful relaxation that is the truest form of human freedom. Part 5. The Logos, aligning with the intelligence of the universe. The Stoics believed in something they called the Logos. This is one of the richest and most profound concepts in all of ancient philosophy, and it deserves our full attention because it sits at the very heart of understanding how Stoic relaxation becomes Stoic manifestation. The Logos in Stoic thinking was the rational intelligence that permeates and orders the universe. Not a personal God sitting on a throne issuing decrees, but a living, dynamic, immanent principle of reason and order that expresses itself in and through everything that exists. The Stoics observed that the universe operates according to principles that are, in their deepest structure, rational. The seasons turn in order. Cause and effect are consistent. Mathematical relationships govern physical reality. Living systems tend toward harmony when allowed to do so. Even the most apparently chaotic events, when understood at a deep enough level, reveal themselves to be expressions of a kind of impersonal but elegant intelligence. They called this organizing intelligence logos, the word, the reason, the divine fire, the universal soul. And here is the teaching that changes everything. The rational mind, your mind, the hegemonikon, the governing faculty of the human person, is not separate from the logos. It is a participation in it, a fragment of the universal reason, temporarily housed in an individual human life. Marcus Aurelius writes, "You are a little soul carrying a corpse." This sounds grim, but it is actually a statement of extraordinary dignity, because the soul he refers to is divine. It is your share of the logos. It is the universe becoming aware of itself through the particular instrument of your consciousness. When your mind is contracted, anxious, distorted by false beliefs, and unconsidered reactions, you are cut off from this participation. You are like a wave that has forgotten it is the ocean. You are experiencing yourself as isolated, insufficient, separate, at war with a universe that feels indifferent or hostile. When your mind is relaxed, clear, aligned, when the hegemonikon is functioning at its highest natural capacity, you are plugged back in. The separation dissolves. You are, in the deepest sense, moving with the current of what is rather than against it. And this is when manifestation becomes not effortful but natural, not because the universe is some kind of vending machine that rewards aligned thinkers with goodies, but because when you are aligned with the logos, when your intentions, your character, your choices, your actions are all flowing from genuine wisdom, virtue, and clarity, you are participating in the same organizing intelligence that creates order and meaning in the universe. And that participation has effects. It changes how you see, what you notice, what you are drawn toward, what draws itself to you. Seneca understood this profoundly. He writes, "It is not that I am brave, that I walk without trembling into danger. It is that I know my soul to be a part of something that cannot be destroyed." Something that cannot be destroyed. When you know this, when you feel this not as an abstract philosophical proposition, but as a living reality of your daily experience, fear loses most of its power over you. Not because danger is not real, but because the deepest part of what you are is not threatened by it. And here is the extraordinary practical consequence. A person who is not fundamentally afraid inhabits a completely different relationship with possibility. Most of us make decisions from fear. Most of our hesitations, our compromises, our self-betrayals, our failures to take the leaps we know we need to take, they all trace back to fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of what we might find out about ourselves if we really try, fear of the unknown, the uncertain, the uncontrollable. But a person who has genuinely relaxed into their participation in the logos, who has, at the core of their being, released the belief that they are a fragile, isolated accident of matter, who must cling to safety at all costs. This person makes decisions from an entirely different place. They make decisions from clarity, from courage, from genuine desire rather than anxious compensation, from abundance rather than scarcity, from wholeness rather than the desperate hope that getting the right external things will make them feel whole. And those decisions, the ones made from that grounded, relaxed, logos-aligned place, tend to be extraordinarily good. They tend to lead somewhere. They tend to open doors that were invisible from the contracted, fear-driven state. They tend to attract exactly the right collaborators, opportunities, resources, and circumstances, not through magic, but through the perfectly natural mechanism of aligned choice and clear, purposeful action. This is manifestation, the real kind, the ancient kind, the Stoic kind, not wishing and hoping and vision boarding your way to a different life, but becoming. Through daily practice, through the disciplined cultivation of a clear and relaxed and virtuous mind, the kind of person whose inner alignment naturally gives rise to the outer life they most deeply desire. Let us talk about how to get there. Part 6, the practice of prosocia, the art of attending to yourself. One of the most important Stoic practices, and one of the least discussed in popular treatments of Stoicism, is what the Greeks called prosoche. Prosoche means attention to oneself, vigilant self-awareness, the ongoing moment-by-moment practice of observing the quality of your own inner state. Not obsessive introspection, not anxious self-monitoring, not the kind of constant self-examination that becomes its own form of anxiety, but a gentle, clear, watchful attention to what is actually happening inside you, to the quality of your thoughts, the nature of your desires, the accuracy of your judgments, the alignment of your actions with your values. Pierre Hadot, the philosopher who more than anyone else returned Stoicism to its practical roots, describes prosoche as the fundamental attitude of the Stoic, the background orientation from which all other practices flow. It is a way of being present to your own existence moment by moment, without losing yourself in either the past or the future. Marcus Aurelius practiced prosoche by keeping his meditations, those extraordinary private journals that functioned as a daily account of his attempts to live up to his own highest ideals. Every evening he would return to himself. He would review the day. He would ask what he had done well, where he had fallen short, what impressions he had handled with wisdom, and which ones had gotten the better of him. Not with self-flagellation, not with harsh judgment, but with the same clear, compassionate, yet honest attention you might offer a student you genuinely care about, acknowledging what needs to improve without destroying the foundation of self-respect that makes improvement possible. This practice, this daily return to yourself, is one of the most powerful tools for mental relaxation you will ever discover. Because most of our anxiety is not actually about real present danger. Most of our mental turbulence is created by a mind that has lost contact with itself, that is running on autopilot, driven by old stories, old fears, old patterns of reaction that may have made sense at some point in our history, but are now simply generating noise. Prosoche is the practice of coming back, of remembering who you are and what you actually value and how you actually want to show up, of catching yourself when you have drifted into contracted, reactive, unexamined patterns of thought, and gently, firmly, lovingly returning to the clarity and groundedness that is your natural state. There is a beautiful Stoic exercise associated with this practice that I want to share with you now. It is called the view from above. The Stoics would regularly practice what Marcus Aurelius describes as widening the lens of their perception. Instead of being immersed in the particular drama of their present circumstances, instead of being the anxious, struggling, needing protagonist of their own local story, they would deliberately expand their perspective. They would imagine rising above their immediate situation, seeing it from higher and higher, seeing their city, then their country, then the continent, then the whole spinning blue earth from the silence of space. They would feel the vastness of history, the empires that rose and fell, the countless billions of human lives that preceded theirs, the infinite stretch of time in which their particular worries occupy the smallest possible fraction, And something remarkable happens when you do this. The problems that felt enormous do not disappear, but they change size. They take their rightful place in the actual scale of things. The presentation that felt catastrophic is revealed as a moment in a long career. The rejection that felt definitional is revealed as one opinion in a cosmos of opinions. The financial difficulty that felt like the end of everything is revealed as a chapter. Painful, yes. Real, yes. Important to address, yes, but a chapter, not the whole story. Marcus Aurelius describes this practice with characteristic economy. Look at everything as if you were seeing it for the first and last time. Then your time on earth will be filled with glory. The view from above does not make you indifferent. It makes you grateful. It replaces the contracted anxiety of a person who has forgotten the scale of their existence with the open wonder of a person who sees clearly. And wonder, genuine, wide-eyed, stoic wonder, is one of the most relaxed states the human mind can occupy. Practice this today. Wherever you are, whatever you are worried about, take a moment and rise. Imagine yourself seeing your current situation from a perspective so wide that the immediate problem becomes small. Not insignificant, not unreal, but appropriately sized. Held in the context of the vastness of your life, your time, your world, your cosmos. Notice the quality of the breath that comes. That breath, that involuntary opening, is the mind remembering its natural size. Part 7. Negative Visualization, the Stoic Art of Grateful Desire. Here is a practice that sounds, on the surface, like the opposite of everything the positive thinking movement has told you. The Stoics practiced something called premeditatio malorum, negative visualization, or the premeditation of evils. Before we go further, let me be clear about what this practice is and what it absolutely is not. It is not catastrophizing, it is not anxiety, it is not obsessing over worst-case scenarios in a way that paralyzes you. It is not a kind of masochistic pessimism that drags you into despair. It is something far more elegant and far more powerful. The Stoics would regularly, deliberately, intentionally spend a few minutes imagining the loss of things they valued. They would imagine the loss of wealth, of health, of loved ones, of their own lives, not to become morbid, but to become grateful. Because here is what the Stoics understood about desire and suffering. The primary source of human misery is not the absence of what we want. It is the taking for granted of what we already have combined with the desperate reaching for what we do not yet possess. We are, most of us, most of the time, oriented toward lack, toward the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And in that orientation, we effectively make ourselves blind to the extraordinary richness of what already exists in our lives. The person who loves you, the mind that thinks your thoughts, the body that carries you through the world, the imperfect and aging but still here, still breathing, still capable of tasting good food and feeling the warmth of sunlight and experiencing the pleasure of a good laugh. Negative visualization is the practice of temporarily, in imagination, removing these things, and then returning to the reality of their presence with the shock of gratitude that comes from genuinely understanding what it would mean to lose them. Seneca practiced this regularly. He would imagine that a particular day was his last, not to dwell in morbid fear of death, but to drain every moment of that day of its full flavor. To be fully present to the extraordinary fact of being alive, to let the ordinariness of the afternoon become, in the light of imagined finitude, something rare and precious and achingly beautiful. He writes, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day." Balance life's books each day. Now here is the connection to manifestation that most people never see. Gratitude, genuine, felt, embodied gratitude, is one of the most powerful states for creative receptivity, not because the universe rewards grateful people with more things, but because gratitude is literally the felt recognition of abundance, and the mind that inhabits a felt sense of abundance is a mind that is open, relaxed, expansive, and naturally creative. The grasping, anxious, desperate mind that is only oriented toward lack generates a kind of internal static, a noise of need that drowns out the more subtle signals of opportunity, intuition, and creative possibility. The grateful, the abundant, stoically relaxed mind is quiet enough to hear those signals. It is steady enough to trust them. It is grounded enough to act on them without being distracted by the constant chattering of insufficiency. This is why the Stoics, for all their reputation for austerity, were some of the most generative, creative, and effective people in human history. Not despite their philosophical practice, because of it. Because the practice of negative visualization, of premeditatio malorum, paradoxically produced in them a felt sense of abundance and gratitude that made them enormously effective at creating real value in the world. Here is the practice, simply stated. Once a day, perhaps in the morning as part of a journaling practice, or in the evening before sleep, spend 3 to 5 minutes deliberately imagining the loss of something you love. It could be your health, your work, your home, a relationship, a capacity, the ability to read, to walk, to create. Do not rush through this. Let it be real. Let yourself feel the weight of the imagined absence, and then open your eyes. Or, if they were already open, look at what is actually in front of you. Return to the reality of what you actually have, and feel it. Feel the extraordinary, unearned, almost incomprehensible gift of what already is. From that place, from that felt sense of abundance, from that warmth of genuine gratitude for the actual reality of your actual life. Set your intentions for what you want to create next. Notice how different it feels to set intentions from abundance rather than lack. How much cleaner, how much more grounded, how much less desperate and effortful and exhausting. This is the Stoic art of grateful desire, the art of wanting more while being genuinely grateful for what already is, the art of reaching forward without pulling away from the richness of the present. It is quite simply the most sustainable and most powerful way to create the life you most deeply want. Part 8. The Discipline of Desire. Wanting what is worth wanting. The Stoics were not against desire. This is important to say clearly, because Stoicism is so often caricatured as a philosophy of suppression. Suppress your desires, suppress your emotions, suppress your needs. Become an emotionless stone that cannot be hurt because it cannot feel. Again, this is completely wrong. Epictetus was deeply passionate about wisdom, as Seneca was passionately devoted to his friendships and to the life of the mind. Marcus Aurelius clearly desired with intensity and seriousness to be genuinely good, to live up to the highest ideals of human excellence. He wanted things deeply, genuinely, intensely. What the Stoics were against was not desire itself. They were against misdirected desire, desire focused on the wrong objects, on things that are unstable, transient, external, and ultimately unable to deliver what we hope they will. They made a crucial distinction between two categories of desire. The first category, desire directed at externals, wealth, fame, physical beauty, others' approval, particular outcomes. Not bad things in themselves, but fundamentally unstable, fundamentally outside our control, fundamentally unable to be the foundation of genuine well-being. A desire for these things, when it becomes the primary driver of our lives, creates a particular kind of slavery, the slavery of a person whose happiness depends on conditions they cannot control. The second category, desire directed at virtue and wisdom. the desire to think more clearly, to be more honest, to develop greater courage, to cultivate deeper compassion, to become more genuinely excellent at the human art of living. These desires are different in kind because their objects are within the domain of what Epictetus called things within our power. You cannot control whether you become rich, but you can choose every day to become wiser. You cannot control whether people admire you, but you can choose every day to be more genuinely worthy of admiration. This is not an argument against pursuing wealth or success or loving relationships or any of the other things that make human life beautiful and full. The Stoics pursued all of these things, but they pursued them as what they called preferred indifference, things worth pursuing, genuinely good, genuinely worth wanting, but not ultimate, not the source of your deepest identity or your truest happiness, not the things you cannot live without. When you shift your primary desire, when you orient your deepest hunger toward becoming genuinely excellent, genuinely virtuous, genuinely wise, rather than toward acquiring particular external outcomes, something remarkable happens to your relationship with everything you do pursue. You pursue it better. You are no longer desperate. You are no longer grasping. You are no longer communicating need to every situation and person you encounter. You show up to your work, your relationships, your creative endeavors as someone who is already whole, who wants to create beauty and excellence, not because they need the outcome to feel okay, but because creating beauty and excellence is itself the expression of what they most deeply are. And people feel that. Situations respond to that. The quality of your work changes. The quality of your relationships changes. The quality of what flows toward you changes. This is the paradox of Stoic manifestation. The less desperately you need particular outcomes, the more naturally those outcomes tend to arrive. Not because the universe rewards detachment, but because the energy of genuine virtue-directed, but non-desperate engagement is itself enormously effective at producing the results it is oriented toward. Seneca captures this beautifully. He who is everywhere is nowhere. When a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends by having many acquaintances but no friends. The same thing must happen to one who seeks intimate acquaintance with no single author but reads them all hastily and cursorily. Focus, depth, the willingness to go all the way into something, rather than skimming the surface of everything. This is the discipline of desire, learning to want fewer things but want them more deeply, more genuinely, more wisely, letting the quality of your desire reflect the quality of your soul. And from that quality of desire, from that deep, clean, virtue-rooted wanting, the life you most truly seek begins to take form. Part 9. Memento Mori, the great relaxation of all the Stoic practices. This one may be the most transformative, and it is also the one that most people initially resist. Memento Mori, remember that you will die. The Stoics meditated on death, regularly, deliberately. They kept it present, not in a morbid, life-darkening way, but as a philosophical practice with a specific and extraordinary purpose. Because the Stoics had discovered something that most of us spend our entire lives avoiding: the awareness of our own mortality when genuinely faced rather than denied is not darkening, it is clarifying, it is liberating, it is, in the deepest sense, relaxing. Here is why. Most of our anxiety, most of our mental tension, most of the grasping and striving and performing and defending that consumes our daily lives, it is driven, at its root, by a kind of unconscious terror of insignificance, of nothingness, of not mattering, of being forgotten, of being, in the end, irrelevant. And the way most of us respond to this terror is not by facing it, but by running from it, by filling our lives with noise, with distraction, with performance, with accumulation, by keeping busy, by achieving, by consuming, by staying so perpetually occupied that the whisper of our own mortality never quite gets loud enough to hear. But the whisper is always there, and the energy required to keep running from it is exhausting. The Stoics stopped running. They turned around. They looked at death directly. They said, yes, this is real. This body will stop. This mind will dissolve. Everything I have built will eventually be dust. Everyone who remembers me will also die. And even the stories about me will one day be lost in the erasure of time. And having looked at this directly, having felt its full truth without flinching, they discovered something extraordinary. It does not matter in the way you feared it would. Not because nothing matters, because you realize in the face of mortality what actually matters. And what actually matters turns out to be quite specific and quite beautiful. The quality of your present experience, the depth of your present relationships, the integrity of your present choices, the authenticity of who you are being right now, in this breath, in this day, in this particular and unrepeatable moment of your one extraordinary life. Marcus Aurelius writes, "How many of Fabius, Scipio, Cato have time engulfed? Think not on the length of time remaining to you, but how well to use what remains. How well to use what remains. This is the gift of memento mori, the clarifying fire that burns away everything unessential, everything performed, everything lived from fear and pretense rather than from genuine love and genuine desire. When you truly know you will die, not as an abstraction, not as a distant possibility, but as the governing truth of your existence. You stop wasting time on things that do not matter to you. You stop living lives designed to impress people you do not actually care about. You stop deferring the experiences and relationships and creative expressions that your soul is actually hungry for. You start living now, and this is the deepest relaxation available to a human being. The relaxation of a person who has nothing to prove, nothing to defend, no performance to maintain, because they have made peace with the most fundamental fact of their existence. Try this practice. Take a quiet moment. Close your eyes if that helps. And sincerely, genuinely contemplate the fact that one day, you do not know when, but one day your time here will end. Feel whatever arises. Do not run from it. Let the feeling be present, and then ask yourself, given this truth, given the precious, finite, utterly unrepeatable nature of my time here, what is the most important thing I could do with today? Not someday, not when conditions are better, not when I have more resources or more courage or more certainty. Today. The answer to that question, the answer that arises from a mind that has genuinely faced its own mortality, is almost always simpler and more beautiful than anything anxiety could produce. It is almost always about love, about genuine creative expression, about deep connection, about the kind of work that is truly yours to do, about being real rather than performing, about showing up wholly in the life you are actually living. From that answer, from that quiet, mortality-clarified knowing, begin. Part 10. The Stoic Morning Practice. How to start your day in alignment. The Stoics were deeply practical people, and they understood that transformation does not happen in grand gestures. It happens in the accumulation of small, daily, consistent practices, the habits of mind and heart that, over time, build the inner citadel, but develop the Stoic character and gradually, reliably transform the quality of your entire existence. The morning was particularly important to Stoic practitioners. Marcus Aurelius begins each day, and we know this because his meditations record it, with a kind of philosophical preparation. Before he engages with the demands of the empire, before he faces senators and military commanders and the endless complexity of governing millions of people, he takes time to orient himself, to remember who he is trying to be, to anticipate the difficulties of the day and prepare his mind to meet them with equanimity. He writes in what reads like a kind of morning prayer, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Now wait, this sounds terrible. This sounds like the most negative possible way to begin a day, but read what comes next. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but of the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine." This is the genius of Stoic morning practice. He does not begin by pretending that the day will be easy or that people will be pleasant. He begins by honestly anticipating the difficulties, and then firmly orienting himself in advance toward the values and understanding that will allow him to meet those difficulties with wisdom and compassion rather than frustration and reaction. He is preloading the day, is setting the tone of his mind before the day begins, rather than allowing the day to set the tone of his mind for him. Here is a morning practice derived from Stoic principles that you can adopt beginning tomorrow. The first element, intention. Before you pick up your phone, before you check your messages, before you allow the external world to make its first demands on your attention, take 5 minutes to sit quietly and ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? Not what do I want to accomplish, though we will get to that, but who do I want to be? What qualities do I want to bring to every interaction, every challenge, every moment of the day ahead? Marcus Aurelius would often remind himself of specific Stoic virtues, courage, wisdom, justice, the temperance, and commit to embodying them in the particular circumstances of the day ahead. The second element, anticipation. Gently, without anxiety, consider what challenges the day might bring, not to catastrophize, but to prepare. If you know there is a difficult conversation ahead, spend a moment imagining it and choosing in advance how you want to show up. If you know there is a task you have been avoiding, acknowledge it clearly and decide on the specific first step you will take. Preparation removes the element of surprise that so often triggers reactive, contracted responses. The third element, gratitude. Spend a moment genuinely acknowledging what you have, not as a performance, not as a ritual, but as a real felt recognition of the extraordinary fact that you are here, conscious, alive, capable of another day. A negative visualization can be powerful here. Imagine briefly that you did not wake up, that this day did not arrive. Then open your eyes to it and feel the gift. The fourth element, purpose. Connect with the larger why of your life, not just today's to-do list, but the deeper current of meaning that runs through your days. What is the contribution you are here to make? What is the expression of your unique gifts and talents and perspective that only you can offer? Let yourself feel connected to that, even for just a moment, before the day begins. From these 4 elements, intention, anticipation, gratitude, and purpose, you launch your day not as a reactive respondent to whatever the external world throws at you, but as an aligned, grounded, purposeful agent of your own choosing. This is what the Stoics meant by taking command of your morning. It is not about rigid routines or 5 a.m. discipline for its own sake. It is about the simple, profound practice of beginning each day from the inside rather than the outside, from your values rather than your inbox, from your wisdom rather than your fears. Over time, weeks, months, years of this practice, the quality of your entire life changes, because you are changing the starting point of every single day. and days are what a life is made of. Part 11, the Evening Review, Closing the Loop of Growth. Just as the Stoics gave us a morning practice, they gave us an evening one. Seneca describes it in beautiful and surprisingly intimate detail. He writes of lying down at the end of each day and conducting what he calls an accounting of his soul, a review of the day that has just passed, conducted with the specific intention of learning from it, integrating it, and releasing it. He asks himself 3 questions, and these questions have been used by Stoic practitioners for more than 2,000 years. The first, what did I do wrong today? Not as self-punishment, not as an invitation to spiral into shame or self-criticism, but as honest, loving feedback from the best version of yourself to the everyday version. What did you do today that was not aligned with who you are trying to be? Where did you react when you meant to respond? Where did you avoid when you meant to engage? Where were you unkind or dishonest or cowardly or small? Look at it, name it, and then release it. It is done. The day is over. The only thing that can come from honest acknowledgement of today's failure is better choices tomorrow. The second question, what did I do well today? This is equally important, and it is the one that many serious, self-demanding people tend to skip. Stoicism is not about perpetual self-flagellation. It is about honest self-knowledge. And honest self-knowledge includes recognizing genuine excellence. The moments when you were exactly who you were trying to be, when you responded with wisdom rather than reaction, when you created something genuinely beautiful, or helped someone genuinely effectively, or chose courage over comfort. Recognize these moments. Savor them, not as ego gratification, but as evidence that the person you are becoming is already real, already present, already alive in the choices you are capable of making. The third question, how could I have done better? Not a guilt trip, a genuine inquiry. Given all the wisdom you possess right now, given everything you have learned from the ancient Stoics and from your own accumulated experience, what would a slightly wiser version of you have done differently in the moment that most needs reflection? Hold the answer lightly, not as a rule to follow mechanically, but as a seed of understanding to plant in your consciousness. Trust that it will be available when you need it tomorrow. And then, and this is crucial, let go of the day. The Stoics were deeply committed to what modern psychology might call closure, to the practice of genuinely finishing the day rather than carrying it into the night, to releasing the unfinished business, the unresolved worries, by the accumulated tensions into the hands of whatever comes next, rather than grinding on them through the night in the futile hope that more thinking will resolve what only action and time can resolve. Seneca writes, "Lie down each night having fully lived and reviewed this day, and you will go to sleep as one who has completed something. As one who has completed something, there is a quality of rest that is available to a person who has genuinely reviewed and released their day. A quality of rest that most chronically anxious, overthinking people never experience. The rest of a mind that has been tended, that has been honest with itself, that has acknowledged what it needs to acknowledge, learned what it needs to learn, and then genuinely, fully let go. And from that quality of rest, the morning comes cleaner. The mind begins the new day less cluttered with yesterday's residue. The capacity for clarity, creativity, and genuine engagement with what each new day brings is restored. This is the rhythm of Stoic practice: morning and evening, intention and reflection, engagement and release. The tide-like movement of a disciplined mind that is always cleaning itself, always growing, always moving toward its truest expression. Part 12, Stoic Relationships, How Inner Peace Transforms Connection. One of the most beautiful and most underappreciated aspects of Stoic philosophy is its understanding of human relationship. The Stoics placed enormous value on what they called oikeiosis, a term that means something like natural affinity, or the gradual expansion of care and identification from ourselves outward to encompass family, community, humanity, and finally, the entire living world. They imagined human society as a series of concentric circles. At the center, you, then your immediate family, then your extended community, then your city, then your nation, then humanity as a whole. The Stoic practice of virtue involved the gradual, deliberate expansion of genuine care and identification outward through these circles, learning to experience the joys and sufferings of those increasingly distant from you as genuinely real and genuinely mattering. This cosmopolitan vision, the vision of all human beings as citizens of a single city, members of a single family, was radical in the ancient world and remains radical today. And it has profound implications for how we approach our most intimate relationships. Because here is what happens in relationships when they are driven by the contracted, anxious, needing state that the Stoics identified as pathos. You relate from scarcity. You need the other person to fill you. You need their approval, their presence, their consistent love to feel okay about yourself. And because you need them so desperately, you inadvertently put enormous pressure on the relationship. Pressure that the healthiest relationships cannot sustain indefinitely. You experience other people's choices as things happening to you. When they disappoint you, you are devastated. When they succeed without you, you are threatened. When they need things you cannot give, you are guilty. When they leave, you are shattered. And your behavior in relationship is driven by fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. A fear of the terrible solitude that might await you if this connection ends. Now here is what happens in relationships when they are driven by the grounded, relaxed, virtue-oriented state of Stoic practice. You relate from wholeness. You want the other person genuinely, warmly, richly, but you do not need them to complete you. Your deepest sense of okayness does not rest on whether they love you correctly today. And paradoxically, because you do not need them in that desperate way, your love for them is actually freer, more genuine, more generously offered. You experience other people as genuinely other, separate, sovereign, mysterious, impossible to fully possess or control. And rather than finding this frightening, you find it beautiful. Because the Stoic relationship with the Logos has taught you that all people participate in the same rational, divine fire. To be in relationship with a human being is to be in relationship with a particular expression of the universe's intelligence. And that is extraordinary. You hold even your most beloved relationships with what the Stoics called the open hand, not possessively, not contractually, but with the same loving generosity that the universe shows in its relationship with everything it creates, giving fully, receiving fully, and ultimately releasing with grace when the time comes. Epictetus uses a beautiful and deceptively simple analogy. He says, when you pick up a fig at a dinner party, do not grab it and hide it and hoard it. Hold it gently, enjoy it. And when the dish is passed on, let it go. Our relationships are like this. We do not own them. We do not possess the people in them. We participate in them fully, generously, wholeheartedly, for as long as we are given to. And the Stoic who has genuinely internalized this understanding relates with a quality of presence and freedom and warmth that is, almost without exception, profoundly attractive. Because people feel the difference. They feel the difference between being loved by someone who needs them and being loved by someone who genuinely, freely, openly chooses them. The latter is the rarest and most precious experience in human life, and it is available to you as you develop the inner security that Stoic practice cultivates. In increasing fullness, Marcus Aurelius, for all the distance imposed by his role as emperor, was clearly a person of deep and genuine warmth. His meditations are full of expressions of gratitude for the teachers, friends, and family members who shaped him. He writes of his wife with tenderness. He mourns his children with real grief. He is not a stone. He is a person who has learned to love in a way that does not contract, that does not grip or hoard or defend, but remains open and present and genuinely warmly engaged with the people in his life. This is the Stoic ideal of relationship. Not emotional distance, not detachment, not the cold superiority of someone who has convinced themselves they do not need anything, but the warm, grounded, generous engagement of a person whose inner security is solid enough to risk being genuinely present with another human being without losing themselves. This is also, not incidentally, by how the deepest and most enduring relationships are built, not through need and desperation, through freedom and genuine, wholehearted choosing. Part 13. The Stoic approach to work, creating from strength. The Stoics had a profound understanding of work, of what it means to engage in meaningful activity in the world. They believed in the concept of kathekon, which translates roughly as appropriate action or fitting behavior, the idea that every person in their particular station and circumstances has a role to play in the larger drama of human life, and that playing that role with excellence, with full engagement, with genuine contribution, this is not separate from the philosophical life. It is an expression of it. Seneca writes, "It is not that I am bold, but that I know my task. The wise man does what must be done, not because he must, but because he chooses it. Not because he must, but because he chooses it." This distinction between doing something because you are driven by fear or obligation or external compulsion and doing it because you have genuinely chosen it as an expression of your values and your contribution makes an extraordinary difference to the quality of the work itself. When you work from fear, when the primary driver of your professional effort is the terror of failure, the dread of judgment, the desperate need to prove your worth, the quality of what you create is always limited by that contracted, anxious foundation. Fear-driven work tends to be safe, derivative, small. It tends to avoid the risks that genuine creativity requires. It tends to optimize for the approval of others rather than for the genuine excellence of the work itself. When you work from the Stoic foundation, from the grounded, relaxed, virtue-oriented state of a person who has made peace with failure and death and the ultimate uncontrollability of outcomes, the quality of what you create changes entirely, not because you stop caring about excellence, because you care about excellence more purely, not contaminated by the performance anxiety that makes most people's best work their second best work. The Stoics called this kind of quality work arete, excellence, or the full expression of your native capacities, and they believed it to be its own reward. Not because material success does not matter, but because the genuine excellence of the work is something you take with you, regardless of its reception. The virtue is in the doing, not in the outcome. Marcus Aurelius, running the most complex administrative and military enterprise of the ancient world, consistently returned to this principle. He tried to do each task, each meeting, each decision, each piece of correspondence, as if it were the most important thing he could be doing, not as performance, as genuine presence. He writes, "Confine yourself to the present. Confine yourself to the present. Do the work in front of you with your full attention, your full intelligence, your full creative presence. Let the future take care of itself. And trust that genuine excellence in the present is the most reliable investment you can make in any future you desire. This is not passive. It is the opposite of passive. It is the most active form of engagement possible. Full presence, full intelligence, full commitment to excellence in whatever is actually in front of you. And here is what happens when you work this way over time. Things build. Genuine excellence accumulates. The quality of your work becomes its own reputation. The depth of your engagement attracts collaborators, opportunities, and resources that you could never have forced or manipulated your way into. Not because the universe is playing favorites, because excellence is genuinely valuable, and the world, however slowly, however imperfectly, tends to recognize and reward genuine value. The Stoic creator does not hustle from a place of lack. They engage deeply from a place of genuine love for the work, genuine commitment to excellence, and the quiet, unshakable confidence of a person who knows that their worth does not depend on any particular outcome. And from that foundation, they create extraordinary things. Part 14, Tranquillitas, the destination that is also the path. There is a Latin word that the Stoics used, particularly Seneca, to describe the highest quality of mind available to a human being. Tranquillitas, tranquility, not the absence of activity, not the stillness of a person who has given up or checked out or withdrawn from the great, messy, demanding engagement of a full human life, but the deep, sustained, a vibrant quietness of a person who is fully engaged with everything, and yet somehow not shaken by any of it, who is present to joy and sorrow, success and failure, connection and solitude, and who meets each with the same underlying quality of steadiness, of grounded clarity, of centered peace. Seneca writes an entire essay on tranquility of mind, in which he explores this quality with characteristic depth and honesty. He acknowledges that it is not a state you arrive at once and then possess forever. It is a practice, a daily orientation, a choice you make again and again in each new moment to return to the center that is always available, but always requires the intentional act of returning. He describes tranquillitas as the state in which we feel neither elated nor dejected by our circumstances, but quietly and consistently ourselves, in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. Quietly and consistently ourselves. This is the destination, and it is also, paradoxically, the path, because every moment in which you practice returning to the center, every moment in which you choose clarity over reactivity, response over reaction, virtue over expedience, presence over escape, you are both practicing tranquillitas and experiencing it. The practice is the thing itself. How do you cultivate this quality practically? The Stoics gave us several specific answers. The first is what we have already discussed at length, the ongoing practice of distinguishing the controllable from the uncontrollable and redirecting your energy to the former. The second is the practice of philosophical reading, of regularly returning to the wisdom of those who have gone before, not to accumulate intellectual content, but to be reminded, to have the wisdom you already know brought alive again in you by encounter with beautiful expression. Seneca recommends choosing one or two teachers and dwelling with them deeply rather than grazing across many. He suggests reading until you find a passage that strikes you to the core, and then stopping, sitting with it, letting it work in you. The third is the practice of what Seneca calls philosophical friendship, the cultivation of relationships with people who are genuinely committed to the same journey of growth and wisdom. Not cheerleaders who will tell you what you want to hear, friends who love you enough to reflect back to you when you are falling short of your own ideals. friends with whom the conversation always leads somewhere, who sharpen your thinking and deepen your commitment to virtue simply by being who they are. The fourth is the practice of voluntary discomfort. The Stoics regularly practiced what we might today call deliberate hardship, fasting, sleeping on hard floors, walking in the cold without a cloak, living for short periods as if they had nothing. And the purpose was not masochism. It was the shattering of the illusion that comfort is necessary for well-being. Because one of the greatest sources of anxiety is the fear of discomfort, the constant low-level dread that if things get hard, we will not be able to bear it. Voluntary discomfort teaches at the level of lived experience that we can, that the thing we fear is survivable, that the body is more capable and the spirit more resilient than our comfort-addicted minds believe. Seneca famously set aside several days a month during which he lived on the minimal food of the poor and wore the simplest clothing and engaged in none of the luxuries his wealth made available. And his report of these days is not grim, it is exhilarated. He writes that the experience produced a quality of gladness and freedom that the luxury could not, because he had reminded himself, practically and viscerally, that he did not need the luxury to be okay. And from that knowing, from that embodied confidence in his own resilience, even the luxury became sweeter, because it was now something enjoyed rather than clung to, something appreciated rather than desperately required. This is the Stoic gift of voluntary discomfort. It transforms your relationship with comfort from dependency to appreciation. And appreciation, as we have seen, is one of the foundations of the relaxed, abundant, genuinely happy state of mind from which everything you most want becomes possible. Part 15. The Philosophy of Flow. How Stoicism enables effortless manifestation. We have covered a great deal of ground together. We have explored the foundations of Stoic practice, the Dichotomy of Control, Amor Fati, the Inner Citadel, the Logos Prosoch, negative visualization, the Discipline of Desire, Memento Mori, the morning and evening practices, the Stoic approach to relationships and work, and the cultivation of tranquillitas. Now I want to bring all of these threads together into a unified vision of what they are all pointing toward and why they constitute, taken together, the most complete and most powerful approach to effortless manifestation that has ever been articulated. The concept I want to introduce is flow, not in the sense of Csikszentmihalyi's psychological flow, though that is related and we will touch on it, but in a deeper, more fundamental sense, the flow of a life that is moving in alignment with its own truest nature and with the larger intelligence that the Stoics called the Logos. Think of a river. When the river flows freely, when nothing is blocking its natural course, when the banks are clear and the water has space to move as it wants to move, it flows with enormous power and grace and inevitability. Things in its path do not need to be forced aside. The force of the flowing water carries them naturally. The river does not struggle to arrive at the sea. It simply flows, and the sea is inevitable. Now think of what happens when the river is blocked. When it meets an obstacle that does not give way, it backs up, it becomes murky, its power is dissipated in turbulence. Instead of moving forward, it churns in circles. Its energy, rather than carrying it toward the sea, is consumed in the futile effort of fighting the blockage. This is what happens to a human life when the mind is contracted, anxious, blocked by fear and false beliefs, and the exhausting project of trying to control the uncontrollable. The life does not stop moving, but its movement becomes turbulent. Its energy is consumed in internal conflict rather than forward momentum. The natural creative intelligence that could be building something extraordinary is instead grinding against itself. The Stoic practices we have explored throughout this video are all, in their different ways, practices of clearing the blockages, of returning the river to its natural state of flowing. The dichotomy of control clears the blockage of futile effort directed at the uncontrollable. Amor Fati clears the blockage of resistance to what already is. The Inner Citadel clears the blockage of dependency on external validation. The Logos connection clears the blockage of the illusion of separation. Prosoche clears the blockage of unconscious, automatic, reactive patterns. Negative visualization clears the blockage of taking for granted and the scarcity of ungratitude. The discipline of desire clears the blockage of misdirected wanting. Memento mori clears the blockage of the unexamined life, of living inauthentically to avoid facing the truth of mortality. Morning and evening practices clear the blockage of accumulating mental residue that clouds perception and distorts judgment. Stoic relationships clear the blockage of needy, contracted love that burdens the people we most want to be close to. Stoic work clears the blockage of fear-driven creativity that can never reach its full expression. And tranquillitas is the name for the state that emerges when enough of these blockages have been cleared. The state of the free-flowing river, the mind that is moving with its own truest nature and with the current of the Logos itself. In this state, in the state of genuine Stoic tranquility, the question of manifestation resolves itself in the most natural way. You do not manifest from this state by forcing or wishing or desperately visualizing. You manifest by being fully, authentically, excellently yourself, doing your best work, offering your truest expression, engaging with genuine love and wisdom and courage, and trusting that the natural consequence of this kind of being, over time, is the life that most fully expresses what you most genuinely are. The Stoics did not have a word for manifestation in the modern New Age sense, but they had a concept that is far more precise and far more powerful. They called it eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is usually translated as happiness, but this is far too thin a translation. Eudaimonia means something like the flourishing of a soul that is living in alignment with its highest nature. The deep, stable, vibrant aliveness of a person who is being exactly what they most genuinely are, doing exactly what they are most genuinely called to do in relationship with themselves and others and the world, in the most genuinely excellent way available to them. It is not a feeling of happiness in the momentary sense. It is not pleasure or excitement or the temporary elation of getting what you wanted. It is something much quieter and much more profound. The bedrock satisfaction of a life genuinely and excellently lived. And the Stoics believed it was available to every human being, not to the rich or the powerful or the talented or the beautiful. To every human being who was willing to do the inner work of clearing the blockages, cultivating virtue, and returning again and again to the center that is their truest self. That this is what the Stoics were offering. Not a system for getting stuff, a system for becoming someone, for growing into the full, free, excellent expression of your deepest human possibility, from which everything that truly matters flows as naturally as water flows downhill. Part 16. Integrating Stoicism into your daily life. The complete practice. Let us now synthesize everything we have explored into a complete daily practice, a Stoic framework for relaxing your mind and living from the place where effortless creation becomes possible. This is not meant to be a rigid prescription. Take what resonates. Adapt what needs adapting. Make it yours. Because the Stoics were always clear that philosophy is not a performance for others. It is a tool for your own flourishing, and it must be shaped to fit the particular contours of your particular life. Upon waking, before anything else, take 5 to 10 minutes for your morning Stoic practice. Begin by breathing, not elaborately, just consciously. 3 deep breaths that bring you fully into your body. and out of whatever dream state carried you through the night. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the reality of the present moment. You are here. You are alive. Another day has arrived. Then set your intention. Ask yourself, who do I want to be today? What qualities do I want to embody? Choose one or two Stoic virtues that feel most relevant to today's particular challenges. Courage, wisdom, justice, temperance. Commit to embodying these not in some grand future gesture, but in the specific moments and interactions that today will bring. Then practice negative visualization. Spend 2 minutes imagining, gently but honestly, that some of what you love is not here, that the day did not come, that the people you love are not available. Then open your eyes to what actually is and let the gratitude flow naturally from that encounter with imagined absence. Then review the day ahead. What challenges are coming? What conversations, what tasks, what potential difficulties? Prepare your mind, not with anxiety, with calm, strategic intention. For each anticipated difficulty, ask, how do I want to respond if this goes wrong? What does my best self do in this situation? Pre-decide. Then release the outcome. Throughout the day, practice the discipline of assent. When something triggers a strong reaction, when an impression arrives that carries emotional charge, take the moment before you respond. Examine the impression. Ask, is this as significant as it feels? Is my initial interpretation accurate? Is there a truer, more generous, more expansive way to understand what just happened? This pause, this moment of examination, is the practice of the inner citadel in real time. It is where the transformation happens, not in grand philosophical moments, but in the small daily choices of how to meet what arrives. Practice returning to what is within your control. Throughout the day, when you notice yourself expending mental energy on things you cannot change, other people's choices, outcomes already in motion, circumstances outside your influence, gently redirect. What can I do? What is my next right action? What is within the domain of my choices, values, and responses? Every hour or so, if possible, take 30 seconds to return to yourself, to check in. How am I doing? What is the quality of my inner state right now? Am I contracted or open, reactive or responsive, aligned with my values or drifting from them? These brief check-ins, this ongoing prosoche, maintain the connection with your own center that is the foundation of Stoic practice. In the evening, before sleep, take your 10 minutes for the evening review. 3 questions. What did I do wrong? What did I do well? How could I have done better? Answer honestly. Learn what there is to learn. Then genuinely let the day go. It is complete. Tomorrow is new. Sleep from the place of having done your honest best and reviewed it honestly. This is the rhythm. Morning and evening throughout the day. Orientation and reflection. Intention and review. The tide-like movement of a mind that is always tending itself, always growing, always returning to the center. If you maintain this practice, not perfectly, not without interruption, but genuinely, consistently, with the patient commitment of someone who understands that transformation happens in the accumulation of small choices, you will find over weeks and months that something fundamental shifts. The quality of your inner state changes. The contracted, anxious, desperately reaching quality of a mind caught in pathos gives way, gradually, to the open, grounded, genuinely alive quality of a mind moving toward eupathia, toward the good emotions, toward the vibrant, stable joy of genuine eudaimonia. And from that quality of inner state, everything changes. Your relationships, your work, your creative output, your health, your resilience in the face of difficulty, your capacity for genuine connection, your access to your own deepest intelligence and wisdom and creative power. not because the universe is rewarding you for having the right inner state, but because the inner state is itself the thing. Because a human being who is genuinely flourishing, who is clear and grounded and generous, and fully alive to the reality of their one extraordinary life, is someone whose very presence creates beauty, builds genuine value, and attracts into the orbit of their life exactly the people and opportunities and circumstances that their soul most genuinely needs. This is manifestation, ancient, stoic, real, sustainable manifestation, not wishing, becoming. Part 17, The Stories That Set Us Free, Stoic Lives as Mirrors. To close this teaching, I want to share with you 3 stories from the lives of the greatest Stoics. Stories that illuminate not the theory, but the living reality of what a Stoic mind looks like in the world. The first story is from the life of Epictetus. Epictetus was born a slave. He was owned, in the most literal sense, by another human being, a freedman named Epaphroditus, who worked in Nero's court. His name, Epictetus, simply means acquired, as in a purchased possession. He had no rights, no property, no freedom of movement, and according to some accounts, his master broke his leg deliberately as a demonstration of power. And yet Epictetus became one of the most influential teachers in the history of Western thought. His philosophy attracted students from across the Roman world. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, called him a teacher. His teachings have survived for more than 2,000 years. How? How does a man who owns nothing, who has had his body violated, who exists at the complete mercy of another's whim, how does such a man become an icon of human freedom and flourishing? By practicing with absolute seriousness the one teaching that no master could take from him, the understanding that his mind, his choices, his values, his responses, these were never within anyone else's control. They were always, entirely, his own. When his master broke his leg, Epictetus reportedly said with great calmness, "I told you that you would break it." This is the inner citadel made visible. This is what it looks like when a human being has genuinely internalized the dichotomy of control. Even his body was taken from him. His mind remained free. If Epictetus could build the inner citadel in those conditions, if he could achieve tranquillitas and wisdom and profound philosophical freedom under circumstances that would break most of us completely, then consider what is possible for you, reading this in the freedom of your own life. The second story is from the life of Marcus Aurelius. There is a year 165 CE when everything falls apart at once for the Roman emperor. The Parthian War is drawing to its close, but a plague has broken out in the returning legions. This is the Antonine Plague, a pandemic that will eventually kill 5 million people across the empire. His troops are dying. His cities are being devastated. The economy is collapsing, and his co-emperor and closest friend, Lucius Verus, dies, some say of the plague itself. And Marcus Aurelius does not flee to his palaces. He does not retreat into bitterness or self-pity or the anger of a man who feels the universe has betrayed him. He governs. He organizes grain distribution. He conscripts gladiators into the military to fill the depleted ranks. He addresses the people. He leads, and he writes in his private journal, "This is so moving, and I want you to feel it." He writes, "What could suit you more? What could suit you more? Even in the middle of plague and war and loss and overwhelming responsibility." He returns to Amor Fati. He chooses his life. He chooses the circumstances he did not choose. He says yes to what is. And because of that yes, because of the grounded, clear, stoic yes that allowed him to be fully present to the reality of his situation without being shattered by it, he governs with what historians describe as extraordinary effectiveness. He saves lives. He holds the empire together. He does his work. This is what a relaxed mind looks like in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Not passive, not resigned, but present, clear, unshakable, effective. The third story is from the life of Seneca. In 65 CE, Nero orders Seneca to take his own life. The Pisonian conspiracy has been uncovered, and though Seneca's involvement was at most peripheral, Nero sees an opportunity to be rid of a man whose moral authority he has always found inconvenient. The soldiers arrive at Seneca's villa. Seneca receives the news with equanimity. He has been practicing for this moment, not because he knew this specific moment would come, but because he has been practicing for it his entire philosophical life. Memento mori made practical. He requests writing materials. He is told he cannot have them. He gathers his friends around him and begins speaking, dictating his final philosophical reflections for them to record. He comforts them in their grief. He maintains his philosophical practice literally to the last breath. He cuts his veins. The blood flows slowly. He is old, and his body does not cooperate with haste. He takes hemlock to speed things along. He asks to be carried to the baths, still conscious, still speaking, and says that he pours his final libation to Jupiter, the liberator. The accounts of those present describe a man of extraordinary grace, who died as he lived, who met the ultimate test of his philosophy and did not flinch. This is what it looks like to have built the inner citadel all the way down, to have practiced so faithfully for so long that the practice becomes the person, that there is no gap between the philosophy and the life. I do not share this to suggest that you should be indifferent to life or to suffering or to the difficulty of loss. Seneca was not indifferent. He loved his wife deeply and reportedly had to insist she not accompany him in death. He felt the loss of his students and friends. He was a fully feeling, fully human person, but he was a person who had practiced so fully, so consistently, so devotedly, that the stoic qualities, the equanimity, the courage, the acceptance, the profound okayness with what is, were as natural to him as breathing. And this is what is available to you, not immediately, not without work, not without the patient, daily, loving accumulation of practice, but gradually, surely, reliably. The Stoic path leads here, to the place where the mind is so genuinely relaxed, so genuinely clear, so genuinely rooted in what cannot be shaken, that everything you most genuinely desire begins to flow towards you with the naturalness of a river moving toward the sea. Part 18, Final Reflections, the life that is waiting for you. You have been on a long journey today, and I am deeply grateful that you stayed. We have covered so much ground: the Dichotomy of Control and Amor Fati, and the Inner Citadel and the Logos and Prosos and negative visualization, and the Discipline of Desire and Memento Mori, and morning and evening practices, and the Stoic approach to relationships and work, and the vision of eudaimonia, and the three extraordinary lives of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. All of these teachings point to a single truth that is so simple you might almost miss its depth. The life you want begins with the mind you are willing to cultivate, not with the circumstances you can arrange, not with the people you can impress, not with the goals you can force, not even with the specific actions you can take, though actions matter enormously. It begins with the mind, with the quality of your inner state, with the depth of your rootedness in your own center, with the clarity and groundedness and genuine, sustainable peacefulness of a person who has done the work of becoming genuinely themselves. From that mind, from that inner citadel that the Stoics spent entire lifetimes building, everything else flows: the relationships, the work, the creative achievements, the material abundance, the health. the experiences, the love. Not because the universe is a vending machine that rewards the sufficiently virtuous with goodies, but because a human being who is genuinely flourishing, who is clear and grounded and alive and real and deeply, authentically themselves, is someone whose presence in the world creates genuine value, builds genuine connections, attracts genuine opportunity, and experiences the genuine satisfaction of a life fully and excellently lived. This is the Stoic promise, not easy, not quick, not a shortcut or a hack or a three-step formula, but real, ancient, time-tested, proven in the most extreme conditions that human life can produce, and available to you right now in the actual circumstances of your actual life, beginning with the very next moment of practice, the very next impression examined before assented to, the very next morning of intentional orientation, the very next evening of honest, compassionate review, the very next releasing of what cannot be controlled, the very next choosing of what is within your power. Begin there, begin here, begin now. Because the life that is waiting for you, the life of genuine clarity, genuine connection, genuine creative power, a genuine eudaimonia, it is not somewhere else. It is not in a different set of circumstances. It is not waiting for you to first get the external things right before your inner life can relax. It is here, in the quality of this moment, in the mind you bring to this breath, in the choice you make right now to take one small step toward the inner citadel that is your deepest nature and your greatest gift. The ancient Stoics built their lives on this truth. They faced empires and plagues and slavery and death and betrayal, and they remained in the part of themselves that mattered most, free. You are standing in a long lineage of human courage and wisdom that reaches back more than 2,000 years and forward into whatever extraordinary future you are about to create. Trust it, practice it, come back to it every day, and watch what your life becomes when you stop fighting yourself. When you finally, fully, fearlessly relax into the magnificent, capable, wisdom-carrying, logos-participating, uniquely irreplaceable human being that you already are and have always been. The river knows where it is going. Let it flow. And that, beloved members of our Stoic Wisdom family, is where we will close today. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want you to know something. That says something profound about you. It says that you are genuinely committed to this journey, that you are not looking for a quick fix or a surface answer, that you are willing to go deep, to stay with difficulty, to sit with wisdom long enough for it to actually work in you. That is the Stoic spirit, and you already have it. Before you go, please, if this video moved something in you, if it gave you even one insight that makes the next hour of your life a little clearer, a little more grounded, a little more genuinely yourself, please like this video right now. It takes 1 second and it means the world to us here at Stoic Wisdom. If you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We put enormous love and care and research and genuine philosophical depth into every single piece of content we create, and we would hate for you to miss what is coming. There is so much more to explore together. Leave a comment below and tell me which part of today's teaching landed most deeply for you. Was it the Dichotomy of Control, Amor Fati, Memento Mori, the evening review practice? Tell me, and tell me where you are in your journey. What are you working with? What is the mountain you are currently climbing? This community is full of people on the same path, and your words matter here. Share this video with someone you love who is struggling, who is exhausted, who is overthinking and overworking and underfeeling, who is chasing things they cannot quite catch and does not yet know that the answer is not to run faster, but to relax deeper. This might be the gift they most need today. and if Stoic wisdom has genuinely added something to your life. If you have found yourself thinking differently, responding more wisely, building your inner citadel one brick at a time because of what we create here, please consider supporting us through Super Thanks, right here on YouTube. Every contribution goes directly back into this work, into the research and the writing and the creation of more of this content that we are so genuinely passionate about bringing to you. We are building something extraordinary together, this community of people who believe that wisdom is not a luxury, but a necessity. That inner work is not self-indulgence, but the most important investment a human being can make. That the ancient Stoics had something so profound and so practical and so urgently needed in the world today that it must be brought forward again and again in forms that actually speak to modern life. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your commitment to becoming more genuinely yourself. I will see you in the next one. And until then, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, the man who ruled the world from the deepest well of inner peace he could find. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Find your strength. It was always there. This is Stoic wisdom, and you are not alone on this path.